It's one of Western Australia's natural jewels. A vast treasure trove of plants and animals on the south coast. The Walpole Wilderness comprises unique ecosystems with links dating back to Gondwana around 140 million years ago. Not a lot is known about the 363,000 hectares of wilderness covered with forests, granite peaks and peat swamps. And how fires, a drying climate and feral pigs are affecting their existence. The area's biodiversity is under threat. It was dedicated as a wilderness reserve 23 years ago, but conservationists are now deeply worried about its future.
The wilderness proposal has been put together by the South Coast Environment Group. It would take in a wide area around Walpole, and one aim is to save forests earmarked for logging by incorporating them into a unique park.
It would actually in effect link the Walpole Nornalup National Park, the Mount Franklin National Park, the Shannon National Park and the Dontecasto National Park into what would become a world-class conservation reserve.
The declaration linked the forests, the granite peaks, swamps and rivers that surround Walpole into a single conservation reserve. World-renowned botanists recognise the area's unique relictual species, like the giant tingle trees. The red-flowering gums and the fly-catching Albany pitcher plant. In the 1980s, the Walpole Nornalup National Parks Association was formed with volunteers working in conjunction with the authorities.
It's been a really important association to me.
Forest scientist Joanna Young was one of the first members.
We've had great friendships, lots of fun, looking at all aspects of initially the Walpole Nornalup National Park, and then we got more actively involved in the whole area of the Walpole Wilderness after that was proclaimed. The community groups were actively encouraged to get a structure and have input to the department on their local assets.
The group began documenting the enormous range of plants and invertebrates unique to this cool and wet corner of the continent.
Right through the 30 years of the association, people have put emphasis on that we've got these eucalypts, the Gondwanan relictual species of limited distribution. Their status should be appreciated by managers and given special treatment. But we battle on still today, and I think some of the frustration in the association is that we feel it's been very difficult to get our voices heard.
The association members have grown increasingly alarmed by the management practices of the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions.
Oh, interesting.
I believe that some of the senior staff in DBCA just play yes, Minister to the hilt. They give what the Minister says, we mustn't let any houses burn down. Well, that's right, we'll just burn everything. And they're really drumming up this fear in the community that it's fuel. Everything's fuel. Well, yeah, it might be fuel, but environmental risk assessment should say, can we avoid some of these values being the collateral damage of a policy that says most of our conservation estate in here should be burned every 8 years, with very little monitoring of what that policy is doing.
The cumulative effects of frequent fires can reduce a healthy wilderness wetland into a wasteland like this swamp east of Denmark, damaged in a prescribed burn in 2019.
The big concern is that, as you can see behind me, this is like an island in a sea of forest, and because it's island-like, it has a range of animals and plants that are found nowhere else on the planet. So if one of these swamps goes up, it's a far greater concern from a conservation point of view than the adjacent forest, which is far more widespread.
But we've been worried about these systems for a while, and the reason why is because they seem to be drying out. One of the reasons why they might be drying out is because of climate change, but I think that there's a different explanation that lies underneath that climate change and the greenhouse gas story that we're familiar with. Leaving bare earth during autumn, I think, is a critical thing that we shouldn't be doing, and introducing fire at the wrong time, either burning in autumn when these organic rich systems are at their most vulnerable, because that's when the water table is at its lowest, or burning in spring, which leaves these swamp systems without a canopy cover for the entirety of summer and autumn.
In one of WA's oldest Tingle-Carry forests, the clock is ticking.
Is DBCA intending to burn it in the next 6 months?
Yes, it is on burn plan.
170 volunteers from around the state, armed with cameras and clipboards, have signed up to help document life in the forest before it's set alight.
There's some incredible invertebrates and incredible fungi, incredible flora that relies on this ecosystem.
Beneath the canopy, the giant trees are home to some tiny survivors, some only recently discovered by WA scientists.
So this part of Western Australia is very special. It includes lots of different species that are found nowhere else on Earth and are only found in these high rainfall forests here on the south coast. They give us actually a really important signal of what habitats used to look like 20, 30, 50 million years ago. The
almost 400 hectare block was chosen for the citizen science project because it hasn't been burnt for more than 40 years.
So we've got a great opportunity to find species that have disappeared elsewhere as the climate has dried.
For the volunteers,
we really urgently need to understand what we're doing with managing this country and particularly with fire.
Every plant, insect and animal is recorded.
Come on. There he goes.
And then uploaded to the iNaturalist website.
And then that's it, sure.
Also linked to the Atlas of Living Australia and to an international database that can be used by scientists across the world. The long-term effects of the burn program is concerning environmental groups across the state.
This is the start of many protests. This is not the last one. This is the first in a whole series of protests. We did hold these right throughout the southwest, because it's not just this forest. There's Carry, there's Jarrah, there's forests all over the place getting burnt down and destroyed by DBCA.
The rally today is specifically about this old-growth tingle forest because it is the last big unburnt area. It's the last example we have left. So scientifically it makes a lot of sense to preserve it as it is, and then you can really compare the difference. And what we're saying is that the current methodology DBCA are using is vastly out of date, and it needs updating, it needs modernising.
It comes as a multi-million-dollar research program gets underway to understand what's happening in the wilderness peat swamps.
It's a beautiful sunset frog, which is a threatened species.
So these are really old species of frog, nothing else like it.
Researcher Dr. Emily Hoffman is part of a team of 24 scientists from UWA and Edith Cowan.
We don't know a huge amount about them, and they're undergoing quite a big decline.
Undertaking a 5-year groundbreaking study funded with $1.4 million from the philanthropic Ian Potter Foundation. Professor Nikki Mitchell is the project co-lead.
Ian Potter funds environmental research across Australia, but rarely done so in West Australia, so we were approached by them as a university to offer up a transformative project in WA, and we were aware of this ecosystem down here as a particularly interesting one that deserved attention, and particularly an imperilled frog, the sunset frog in this ecosystem.
This has got
The scientists are collaborating with the WA Museum and local volunteers from the Walpole Nornalup National Park Association.
This is the main peat-forming vegetation type here. This is Ampidisma. Historically, you would see in these peat systems, you would see really large accumulations of the Ampidisma, and it can form metre and a half high clumps. The frequency and the severity of the fires that are coming through here is definitely having an impact on the structure of these systems and then how they function as ecosystems as well.
An Indigenous group contributes important cultural knowledge of the area.
And we're bringing, as they bring science and Western science to the forefront in understanding these systems, we bring in our cultural knowledge, our Cardigan, handed down through the generations, and so it's a blending of Western science and cultural science together.
But the research will not gather dust. The Peat Project's chair wants to see practical improvements to the way the wilderness is managed.
Well, I think there's a growing body of funds in Australia from philanthropic sources devoted to environmental questions, so that's certainly possible. One would hope that the state government would see the importance, and increasingly we see the importance of protecting our biodiversity, and this in a way is holding a lantern, if you like, to the problem that exists in the peatlands, and we would certainly be urging governments to examine these findings with a view to ensuring that you get the long-term commitment to management that is required.
Tim Foley is the Department of Biodiversity Conservation and Attractions Manager, covering the Walpole Wilderness.
It's interesting, it's a challenge not just in Western Australia, actually in other states too. They're actually grappling with similar issues in Tasmania, New South Wales, and you know, this is emerging, and certainly I think we can't deny the fact that the shift in climate that we've seen in the southwest and the drying climate is a complexity, a new complexity that we've got to adapt to and manage to. I think it's important to remember we can't exclude fire from the landscape. We've just been in a very hot fire season, and it's been an active fire season. We've had multiple lightning strikes, some in the Walpole Wilderness area, some nearby, and some significant fires as a result of that. So fire is and will remain part of what happens in this part of the world and how prescribed fire is used. So yes, there's opportunity in this to look at and refine and adapt our management to look at how we can better accommodate protecting certainly the organic soils within the Walpole Wilderness area.
I believe that it's time to have a publicly accessible, open, independent review of the stresses that are on the forest and the best way to handle life and property concerns and biodiversity conservation in the circumstances.
Do you think an independent review, though, would carry sufficient weight to get policymakers to review and change what the department has been doing for decades?
I'm ever hopeful, and you only have to come here and see what's happened to realise the extent of damage that has occurred in this truly irreplaceable island-like system that's scattered all through the forest.
I would really like to get more of the bureaucrats and some of the politicians to come down so that we could take them and look at some of this country. Some of the country I've been observing for the last 35 years since I've lived in Walpole. And if they came on a tour and I could take them to some of these burnt out systems where there used to be rare frog populations that are now lost, that perhaps they'd say, yeah, hey, we can do this better. But if we just polarise the debate and say, oh, to prescribe burn or not to prescribe burn, we're all going to be the losers. But if we can actually get a more open and transparent discussion about the trade-offs, about protecting ourselves and actually looking after some of this unique biodiversity, often many species of limited distribution, and do it better.
In the autumn of 2024, an arsonist inflicted immense devastation.
From what we know, it was a deliberately lit fire, so basically arson,
And yeah, unfortunately we're looking at an area of about 13,500 hectares that has been burnt, and some of it has been burnt at the highest severity, which means that there's going to be a huge impact on the forests and the wetlands that are in this area. A lot of them are known to contain sunset frogs, and what we do know is at least 4 populations of sunset frogs have been impacted by the fire, but we won't know for quite a long time, at least for probably 12 months, what that level of impact is and whether the frogs have survived or haven't. And the same goes for the Rates tingles. The Rates tingles are one of the 3 tingle species, but it's the rarest one. And what we suspect is about 70 to 80% of the world's Rates tingles have been burnt in this wildfire. So it does sort of influence the prescription burn program and how that's applied. So yeah, we will be looking at, with the teams of scientists and the department, at the recovery of this and how fire is applied to it in the future.